now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 15th. Tropical Storm Felicia was named in the Eastern Pacific earlier today, bringing the total number of storms so far this year to a whopping 40 on day 196 of the year, otherwise known as July 15th, 2021. Starting things off with the Atlantic Ocean on day 45 of hurricane season. The area of interest that we marked last night is still there, still remains largely unchanged at a 10% chance of formation in 5 days. Jumping over into the East Pacific on day 61 of hurricane season, here's a closer look at Felicia, tracking currently towards the west out to sea, as well as being closely followed by a 70% area of interest, which doesn't have an inverse number as of right now, towards Felicia's east. This area of interest is also tracking to the west. Over on the other side of the Pacific, 98W is already at a high chance of formation despite only being invested last night, currently at an 80% chance of formation in 5 days as it tracks north-northwest towards the Japanese island of Kyushu. Over in the North Indian, it's fairly quiet as per the norm for this time of year in this part of the world. Monsoonal activity is still ongoing in this part of the world. Nothing tropical is active right about now. Jumping back into the North Atlantic, satellite imagery, the 10% area of interest is slowly getting its act together, still remains as a 10% chance of formation in 5 days. We don't expect it to get an inverse number yet, and it really shouldn't do as it progresses. It might, you never know. Over in the East Pacific, Felicia was designated earlier today. You can really see it. It's developing quite nicely as it tracks towards the west, closely followed by a 70% area of interest off the coast of Mexico, which is also tracking towards the west, closely following behind Felicia. Over in the Western Pacific, 98W is developing quite nicely as it continues its track towards Kyushu. It's definitely something to keep an eye on as it progresses towards the Japanese island. Over in the North Indian, there are no invests, no areas of interest for this part of the world, as is to be expected for this time of year. Monsoonal activity is still ongoing, as you can see on your screen right about now. Tropical Storm Felicia already has cloud tops in the -80s. If you really ask me, I think it's well on its way towards becoming a hurricane. It certainly has its potential. But yeah, speaking of becoming a hurricane, our latest cone by our very own Xavier Burns has Felicia peaking as a Category 2 system with winds of 105 miles an hour as it continues its westward track out towards the sea. Sea surface temperatures, the West Pacific remains incredibly warm with 30-degree temperatures either side of the Philippines. The North Indian is maintaining 28-29 degree temperatures due to the monsoonal activity keeping it rather cool. The tropical Atlantic is fairly warm, by extension the Gulf of Mexico as well. The subtropical region is getting warmer, but it still lags behind the tropical region by quite a bit. A similar story over in the East Pacific as well. The tropical region is getting warm, the subtropical regions are slowly warming up, and it remains to be said the southern hemisphere is in winter mode right about now, so no activity really should be expected there. Jumping into the sea surface temperature anomalies, the East Pacific area all the way from Baja California to Hawaii and just by extension a little bit past Hawaii still remains fairly cooler than average. The northern central Pacific is still abnormally above average. The subtropics of the Atlantic still remain fairly below average, and also by extension some spots in the tropical Atlantic, but most of that region remains at or above. The West Pacific also remains largely warmer than average, and the North Indian is mostly above average except for the West Central Arabian Sea. On this day, we had Typhoon Mayon, Philippine name Ineng, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, almost at its peak intensity, which it will attain tomorrow. It would go on to affect the Japanese islands of Shikoku and Honshu. Up next in the Atlantic storm names, we have Fred, then followed by Grace. Up next in the East Pacific, the next names on the list are Guillermo, followed by Hilda. And whether you like it or not, still to come in the Central Pacific storm names naming list 1 is Hone. Over in the Western Pacific on list 4, the next name on the list is Infa, followed by Sempaka. Up next in the North Indian storm names is Gulab, followed by Shaheen, but we may not be seeing those two names for a few months. Over in the Southern Hemisphere, in the Australian region, the next name on the list is Paddy, followed by Ruby. First up in the Southwest Indian, the first name on the lat list is Anna, followed by Batsirai. And finally, up next in the Fiji region is Cody, followed by Dovey. That's all from me for now. We'll see you tomorrow night for another Tropical Weather Bulletin.